A new predictive guide has further emphasized the extent to which a second Trump term is dangerous for the entire world. This is super interesting and also pretty horrifying. So each year, the publication The Economist releases something called the World Ahead, which is a predictive guide of the coming year. And this year, that guide identifies Donald Trump as the greatest danger, not just to the United States, but to the world, which is pretty stunning. So let's hear out what The Economist has to say. First, a shadow looms over the world. In this week's edition, we published the World Ahead 2024, our 38th annual predictive guide to the coming year. And in all that time, no single person has ever eclipsed our analysis as much as Donald Trump eclipses 2024. The Trump victory next November is a coin toss probability is beginning to sink in. It then discusses how Trump is clearly going to be, unfortunately, the nominee of the Republican Party for president and is, at least according to the polling, neck and neck with Biden in the general election. It also outlines how Trump's lies about the 2020 election and attempts to prevent the peaceful transfer of power have created and defined a movement around him that puts him above the democracy. Lies that so much of the Republican Party has rallied around. And then those lies are going to be used to justify actions in a second Trump term that could destabilize the United States and throw the whole world into chaos, given the power and influence of the United States. Reading further, because MAGA Republicans have been planning his second term for months, Trump 2 would be more organized than Trump 1. True believers would occupy the most important positions. Mr. Trump would be unbound in his pursuit of retribution, economic protectionism, and theatrically extravagant deals. No wonder the prospect of a second Trump term fills the world's parliaments and boardrooms with despair, but despair is not a plan. It is past time to impose order on anxiety. The greatest threat Mr. Trump poses is to his own country. Having won back power because of his election denial in 2020, he would surely be affirmed in his gut feeling that only losers allow themselves to be bound by the norms, customs, and self-sacrifice that make a nation. In pursuing his enemies, Mr. Trump will wage a war on any institution that stands in his way, including the courts and the Department of Justice. And that's something that we've been discussing extensively lately. If you look at the details of Project 2025, for example, along with reporting generally about Trump's plans for second term, there was that Washington Post piece recently and some New York Times reporting, you understand the way that the rule of law would be undermined is stunning. And our democracy, the way it would be deteriorated, also very stunning and frightening, and Trump would do everything he could to govern as an authoritarian. And the reason this has such a massive impact on the rest of the world is if the United States is thrown into chaos with Trump locking up his critics as he's promised to do multiple times and invoking the Insurrection Act to crush demonstrations against him as he is also planning on doing, and all these different actions, our adversaries internationally would benefit and the globe would be destabilized. Super serious stuff, obviously, that we're talking about here. As a reminder of some of what we've learned recently about Trump's plans for a second term, here is Jen Psaki on MSNBC.
Guess what? Joe Biden isn't perfect. No candidate is, by the way. But we have to understand what the alternative is here. If elected to a second term, Donald Trump would prosecute anyone he deems an enemy, unleash troops on protesters, and essentially unravel the rule of law as we know it. And this time, he plans to align his administration with people who will actually help him do it. But sure, Joe Biden is 3 years older and occasionally trips over things. Look, there's a lot to be concerned about right now when it comes to a second Trump term. The speeches are getting much more disturbing and much more unhinged, and we should all hear it that way. It's also important to talk about all of this and important to call it out. But there is nothing more important than digging into his actual plans. The faintest of silver linings here is that Trump is warning us in his own voice, with a microphone on and a camera rolling, by the way. He's telling us exactly what he plans to do. We all just need to listen.
We are clearly headed into a completely different form of government than any of us would recognize as continuous with the past. Right-wing authoritarian government in league with Putin, Xi, Orban, Bolsonaro,
Putin
you
and
name
Xi
it.
and Orban, and those are some serious authoritarian dictators out there, but they're people, it sounds like you're saying people should look at if they're wondering what a second Trump term would look like.
And as you dive into Trump's plans for a second term, you see the extensive set of actions, many that have been publicized by the group Project 2025 that are described as crushing the administrative state or whatever, but are really hindering the ability for the government to seamlessly function and then centralizing power for the president. Here's more from the Economist piece. Yet a Trump victory next year would also have a profound effect abroad. China and its friends would rejoice over the evidence that American democracy is dysfunctional. If Mr. Trump trampled due process and civil rights in the United States, his diplomats could not proclaim them abroad. The global South would be confirmed in its suspicion that American appeals to do what is right are really just an exercise in hypocrisy. America would become just another big power. And then it finishes with this, a pretty powerful paragraph. A second Trump term would be a watershed in a way the first was not. Victory would confirm his most destructive instincts about power. His plans would encounter less resistance, and because America will have voted him in while knowing the worst, its moral authority would decline. The election will be decided by tens of thousands of voters in just a handful of states. In 2024, the fate of the world will depend on their ballots. A pretty freaky prospect, to be sure, but it's why we have to do everything we can to get Biden elected. Trump has called for the termination of the Constitution. He tried to shred the Constitution in his allegedly illegal scheme to block the peaceful transfer of power and install himself the president. He failed, luckily, in that effort, but may not next time. Having that in the White House does create for the potential of global destabilization if America and American democracy unravels. Here's former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger saying, for that reason, we have to vote for Joe Biden. And obviously, I think Biden's first term has been pretty successful, but Kinzinger saying, even if you don't, you got to vote for Biden.
What do you assess the third party movement, if there is another candidate, knowing that these presidential elections are made state by state? What's your analysis?
I'm worried because, look, I love the idea of a third party. I love the idea of a centrist party. It has to start in the House of Representatives before it goes to the president. Now, here's the deal. I think Donald Trump's base of support is very firm. I don't think you're going to peel anybody off of Donald Trump into something else, right? There are people like me, that not me, but like me, that don't agree with everything Joe Biden does, but would vote for him as opposed to Trump. If you give them an out, you give them a Joe Manchin or somebody, they'll vote for that person. And you may be like, and I would say this too, like, good, vote your conscience. But the problem is the consequences of a Donald Trump victory are so dire that I think you have to hold your nose and vote for somebody maybe you don't like, because we can survive 4 more years of Joe Biden. I'm not sure we can survive 4 years of Donald Trump.
And when you have a former Republican congressman saying that, you're in a pretty freaky spot where Kinzinger rightfully doesn't know if American democracy would even survive 4 more years of Trump. And I know to some people this can sound sort of hyperbolic. I promise it's not. You have presidential historians sounding the alarm, experts on authoritarianism, and so many different people. This isn't a situation where we're just, oh, we don't like Trump, so he's a fascist. It's diving into the specifics of what he's done so far, what he's been saying recently, the plans that have been reported on, and just kind of what has been broadcasted by the allies around him for a second term, then setting that next to history. And then we're talking about an actual existential threat to American democracy. And maybe he wouldn't be successful in some of his ambitions, but we don't want to give him a chance. One more Adam Kinzinger moment that we've looked at in the past. This is with Anderson Cooper, and Adam Kinzinger says, your vote in 2024 is either for democracy or authoritarianism.
Do you still consider yourself a Republican?
So it's a tough question. I do, only in that because I don't want to give up on that fight. I mean, this country needs 2 healthy parties, a healthy Democratic Party and a healthy Republican. So I'm not going to give up that title. A country needs a good conservative and a good liberal movement at any time in their lives. I still have the title, but I voted Democratic last election cycle. If it's Trump against Joe Biden, I'll vote Democratic this coming one. Because, Anderson, I really believe it's down to one issue on the ballot. And not taxes, not even abortion, nothing. The one issue is, do you believe in democracy or do you believe in authoritarianism? And I think that's the only thing we should be voting on.
Because you see a legitimate slide to authoritarianism if Donald Trump is reelected?
I see, if he's reelected, not a slide, a sprint. Because in January 6th, we saw the guardrails, of democracy held. The car hit the rails, it kept you on the road. That rail can't take 2 hits. And now they know what they're doing. Now they know where the tricks are in the system. I guarantee you Donald Trump will not put people around him that are loyal to the Constitution and will push back. He'll put, if you interview 100 people, trust me, you're going to find somebody to be Attorney General that simply tells you, I'll do whatever you want, Mr. President. Those guardrails are being ripped out. And that's what I see as what would happen, frankly, if he's reelected.
I really do think it's a powerful message coming from someone like Adam Kinzinger, who voted for Trump in the past, is a Republican, and is trying to wake people up to this fact. We can't roll the dice with American democracy. And as the Economist is pointing out, that could truly cause just unbelievable damage to the entire world. We can't give Trump the chance to act out his worst authoritarian impulses. So you can either have common sense policy with some gaffes here and there, or an existential threat to the stability of the rule of law and democracy in America. Up to you. Before you go, don't forget to become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership to get the daily bonus show Monday through Friday. Plus, follow me on Threads at Luke Beasley Official, Instagram at Luke Beasley Official, X at Luke P. Beasley, and sign up for the Beasley Brief, a daily morning newsletter that summarizes the previous day's events by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/brief. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, and I'll talk to you all next time.